born to be.
Hello, everyone. You are very welcome to today's Agile 42 webinar. As you can see from the screen, the topic today is how to assess your Agile teams. My name is Suzanne. I will be acting as host. In the background, we have Emily, who will be chatting with you in the chat. I will give my co-hosts a moment to introduce themselves in a moment, but I want to give you some tips on interacting with us first. So if you do want to chat with us, comment along in the chat. Just make sure to select everyone on the drop-down menu, and that means we all see your comments. However, if you do have a specific question, just pop that into the Q&A and we will come back to questions then at the end. The last tip for me is we will be using Mentimeter polls as part of our webinar. So I would recommend that you have your mobile or cell phone ready. We'll display a QR code for that. If you're not so comfortable using QR codes, we will also drop a link and a code into the chat so you can join along in the poll with the web browser. So I'm going to hand over to Alessa first. Please introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you, Suzanne. Yeah, happy to see that there's a lot of people joining today from different places all over the world. I'm in the western part of Germany, in the countryside. The region is called Eifel, and we're currently having some thunderstorms here. I've been working in different agile roles in the last 10, 12 years. Started off as a product owner, worked as a Scrum Master, release train engineer, and finally as an Agile Coach. So I know different perspectives of how it feels like working in an agile team. And handing over to my colleague, Greg.
Thank you, Alyssa. Yes, Greg Keegan. I'm an American living in Berlin now for 34 years, the last 16 of which I've spent as an Agile Coach, and before that, a Scrum Master. So I have seen a lot of different setups, and I've worked with a lot of different teams, and this is a topic that's dear to my heart. I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. Let's see who we have in the room.
And for that, yeah, we have prepared the first Menti, as Suzanne announced. You can see here a QR code on the screen that you can either scan with your mobile phones to answer the question what your focus area at work is, or you can type in menti.com and use the code that is displayed on the slide. So we could have product people here, for example, product managers or product owners, people that care about people, so Scrum Masters, coaches, team leads, or HR people, for example, or maybe developers, development of products or services. And for that, we're giving you a little bit of time. And in the background, I'll have a look at the results.
In the meanwhile, I would like to share just kind of a rough agenda of what we're going to cover today. First, we're going to look at how and why we assess teams. What are some of the challenges that come up when trying to assess teams' agility? We're going to explore some team assessment techniques that are out there, and then share with you our practical approach to a team assessment, and then how you can leverage those assessment results in your coaching. That will be our goal for today. How are we doing on the results there?
I'm super happy that we have 42 answers, 45 now, but I will make a cut and put them on the slide so you can see. You can, of course, continue answering, but I'll just take a snapshot and share with you guys what the results are so we can have a look at the results. Most of the people work with people. So we've got a lot of Scrum Masters, coaches, team leads, or HR people here, which is cool. Very interesting topic for you guys. So you're in the right place today.
Excellent. Let's get started then.
Yeah, this is a question we often get asked as Agile coaches. Our clients come to us and say, how agile are our teams? And most of the time, this question is followed by, how can I assess the agility of my team? We consider that rather as a traditional approach, which imposes external assessments on teams without their input or involvement. And we think this can lead to detachment, disengagement, and superficial efforts. So pitfalls of this traditional approach to ask how agile are my teams can include resistance, undermining autonomy, or manipulation of results. And we will get back to that later. We think that true growth and improvement in agile teams come from within. So shifting our focus to whether the team wants to assess itself aligns more with agile principles of empowerment, collaboration, and ownership. So we want to ask, isn't the question rather, does the team want to assess itself? So shifting to self-assessment empowers teams to take ownership, identify areas for improvement, and define meaningful actions. And benefits of that are ownership, engagement, continuous improvement, collaboration, learning, and flexibility. So instead of asking, how do I assess my team? Let's rather ask, does the team want to assess itself? Because by embracing self-assessment, we empower teams to take charge of their own growth and improvement. And now that the question about what we're asking is clarified, we will have a look at what should we assess. And Greg is taking us through that.
Yeah, here's a question that we often see. Are people doing Agile or are they being Agile? And as you can see here with our onion, assessing that which we can see is easy, but it often changes over time. People change the tools or practices and how they do things often. It might suggest the team is doing Agile, but it doesn't tell us whether the team has adopted an Agile mindset. How a team lives Agile values and principles are less visible, but are a more precise indication of the team's agility. So let's take a look at some of the challenges to assessing team agility.
And for that, we will ask you to take your phones or browsers out again. This is a new code that you can scan either with your cell phone or type into your browser. So what is your biggest challenge with regards to assessing team agility? If you look back to what you have experienced, feel free to use the Mentimeter again, and we will build a word cloud out of what you answered and share it with you again in a moment. Greg, that would be the moment where you can sing the Jeopardy song, by the way.
Oh yeah, or that's Suzanne's job. How did the theme for Jeopardy go?
Do, 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 do.
Dum, 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 dum.
Don't ask me to make a fool of myself. I'm so happy to do so.
I forgot to set the timer.
Okay, we have 8 answers until now. We can take some more time for the others.
I just want to answer a question quick. Pascal, you're right. And our graphics designer drew it that way originally, but I wanted to switch it around. But you're right. The other way around is often there, that you can see the tools on the outside and it's going in, looking inside to the mindset. We'll have to change that. Our graphics designer is going to be mad at me.
Okay, the word cloud is filling up. I will take a snapshot to share with you. There we go.
You ready?
Yes.
All right. Drum roll, please. Whoa. What to measure? Awareness. How do you measure awareness? That's a good question. Definitions. Lack of leadership support. Lack of understanding. Values are hard to assess. That's very true. We'll come back to that. Objectivity. Another point we'll talk about. New team members. That changes things. No data. Having the right metrics, another good point we'll touch on. Honesty, yeah, we'll touch on that point as well. Availability, are they there? Are they present to do an assessment? and the willingness to be assessed. Nice questions, nice challenges. Let's go on and look at some that we pulled out. So assessing team agility is crucial to understanding their progress and identifying areas for improvement. That's the why we do it in the first place. But what are some of the unique challenges that we've seen in evaluating team agility? First of all, subjectivity. One of the key challenges is the subjective nature of agile practices. As already mentioned, agility encompasses a mindset, values, principles, and behaviors, which can be difficult to measure objectively. An effective assessment needs to strike a balance between objective criteria and subjective observations to gauge team agility accurately. Assessing team agility can be challenging due to the limited visibility into the internal workings of the team. Agile teams often work autonomously and self-organize, making it difficult for assessors to have a complete picture or understanding of the processes, interactions, and decision-making. Limited visibility can hinder the accuracy of the assessment. That's why a self-assessment can be even more valuable. Standardized metrics. There's a challenge here in finding standardized metrics that capture the essence of agility across different teams and contexts. Agile practices can vary widely, and it's essential to tailor assessment metrics to fit the specific Agile framework or methodology that is being used. A one-size-fit-all approach can lead to inaccurate assessments. And lastly, assessing team agility requires evaluating not only individual performance, but also team dynamics and collaboration. Assessing the effectiveness of teamwork, communication, and collaboration can be complicated. It requires a deep understanding of the team's interactions, level of trust within the team, and the overall synergy within the team. So there are, though, ways to overcome these challenges, and I'll hand over to Alessa to share some of those.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Also observed that some of the challenges you guys mentioned in the word cloud popped up again here. And we have tried to gather some of the good practices we see to overcome the challenges that you might be facing. So what we recommend is to adopt a balanced approach that combines objective criteria with subjective ones. And I remember that some of you have mentioned objective criteria earlier as a challenge. We will show you a practical example later of how that can look like to combine those criteria, but it's important to not just look at the objective part, also some subjectivity to bring in. Also, we recommend to tailor assessment metrics to fit the specific Agile framework or methodology, as Greg just said, and to foster transparency and open communication to enhance the visibility into team activities. And that is the subjective part that I just mentioned above. Metrics cannot always grasp this transparency and communication part. And also, fourth point, embrace iterative assessments that really capture the dynamic nature of agility. It does not make sense to measure once and then forget about it, keep it in mind. It might make sense to regularly reassess to really capture this dynamic. And the fifth point is use a combination of quantitative and qualitative techniques to assess these team dynamics and the collaboration. And we will go a little bit deeper into that now to see what the difference is. So before we start looking at different assessment techniques that Greg is going to show us, we're going to explore then these differences between the two quantitative and qualitative assessment techniques. Quantitative assessment techniques really rely on measurable data and objective metrics. They provide numerical insights into team performance, like productivity, and can be key performance indicators. Examples of those quantitative assessment techniques include metrics like velocity or burn down charts, maybe something like defect density or customer satisfaction ratings like the Net Promoter Score. Quantitative assessment techniques have several benefits, of course. They provide clear and measurable data that will allow you to easily track the progress over time. And this quantitative data helps to identify trends, patterns, and also areas of improvement. So where we really recommend this is if you want to see progress over time in a team, it makes sense to work with quantitative data. Qualitative assessment techniques, on the other hand, they focus on gathering subjective insights and observations. And this approach involves techniques such as interviews, surveys, it could also be observations. And these qualitative assessment techniques aim to understand the team's mindset, the collaboration, communication within the team, and their adherence to agile values and principles. So qualitative assessment techniques offer another point of benefits. They provide a deeper understanding of team dynamics. The team members' perceptions can be covered here, and the context also that surrounds the team performance. Qualitative data helps to identify areas of improvement, for example, in communication, collaboration, and also in terms of the agile mindset, what Greg mentioned in the beginning in the onion. So it also allows for capturing nuances that quantitative data may miss. It goes deeper. So when assessing agile teams, both quantitative and qualitative techniques have their merits. Qualitative techniques provide a deep understanding of the team's mindset, while quantitative techniques offer objective metrics and enable to measure this progress over time, as I just said. And combining both of those approaches can provide a more comprehensive assessment of team agility by capturing both, like the subjective experience and measurable outcomes. And Greg is now going to show some of the example of assessment techniques that exist out there.
Greg, you're on mute.
I knew that was going to happen. That has to happen at least once. Unmute me. I'm unmuted now. Yes, leading up to today's webinar, I just stumbled across a research paper from the University of Waterloo done in December last year, where they found 60 different types of agile team assessments. And all of them kind of fit into these 4 areas. And as Lessa mentioned, we need a comprehensive approach, but let's see what's out there. So first of all, agile maturity models, they provide a very structured framework to assessing team progress. Their progress on their agile journey and can be repeated often. These models define different levels of maturity, allowing teams often to self-assess and find areas to improve. And 2 examples of this out there are the Agile Maturity Matrix and the Agile Capabilities Assessment, ACA. Surveys and questionnaires are valuable tools for collecting feedback from team members and stakeholders. They provide a way to assess various aspects of agile team performance, such as team dynamics, collaboration, and alignment with the agile values and principles. By analyzing the survey responses, we can identify patterns and areas of improvement where it's needed. Here, 2 examples, team health check and team metrics. Both of these approaches can be tricky though, because it can push people into compliance, right? Instead of doing agile instead of being agile. So they might score their, try to score high because they think they're doing the right things or want to see, show that they're doing the right things. So it might be gained to get better results. Observations and interviews. This is a good way. It involves direct interaction with the team, observing their activities and conducting interviews with team members. An Agile coach can gain insights into the team practices, the communication, and their collaboration. This technique, as I said already, provides a more qualitative understanding of team dynamics and helps to assess the team's adherence to Agile principles. Think about the lean approach, the Gamba walk, if any of you know that out there. Go and see, they would tell the managers, and see what's going on and ask questions and to find out what problems need to be solved. This, however, takes time and effort, so many don't prioritize it that high to do that. Then lastly, metrics and KPIs. These can play an important role in assessing Agile teams by collecting and analyzing data related to the team performance, and as mentioned, velocity or throughput or quality metrics or customer satisfaction. We can gain valuable insights into the team's progress and identify areas of improvement. This is a quantitative approach which supplies objective measures and it will enable you to track team performance over time. It can have many pitfalls, though, and we'll look at those shortly. But remember, the choice of the technique should align with the team's needs. What do they need now? And the desired outcome of the assessment. And if we use a combination of these techniques, we'll get a more holistic and well-rounded assessment. We now have time, Alyssa, I think, to ask another question to the group.
Yes, we do. That's good. We were not sure if we would have time for that, but we're looking forward to get your answers on that question. Which techniques have you used already for assessing team agility? So we'd like to get an insight of what you've been using out there. And for that, there's a new QR code that you can either scan or put into your browser, just like you did before.
And so that Suzanne doesn't have to sing, I'll put a timer up. Give it a minute.
I would love to hear an Irish folk song, though.
As soon as someone asks me that off the top of my head, nothing comes to mind. But I ask Greg. Somebody in the chat asked about the research paper you spoke about. I believe it had the word Waterloo in it. If you could share which one it was.
The University of Waterloo. I've unfortunately closed that browser, but I will find it and put it in the chat, or at least follow up with it. Conducted by the University of Waterloo, published 21 December 2022. Agile Assessment Methods, Current State of the Art is the title. I'll put that in the chat. But I don't have the direct link anymore because I had to close all my windows so my computer didn't crash.
And we still have some answers coming in. Waiting a little bit more. Okay, Greg, we have some answers here.
Shall we see?
Yes.
Survey is big in the middle. That's often mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the matrix that I mentioned. Scrum health check. Squad health check survey, that's combining both. KPI measurements, metrics. I thought those would be bigger. KPI like velocity. That's an interesting, we'll talk about pitfalls soon, but I had a conversation with Jess Sutherland recently where we had a little discussion about whether velocity is a good measure of performance or productivity. But let's say that maybe for the Q&A. In fact, I might get emotional. Shall we go on?
Yes. Just quickly checking the chat, having difficulties with Menti. Maybe just post the link directly. Okay. Maybe Emily or Suzanne, you can support us with that. Cool. Thank you. So
Birgit put up the link to the research paper I was talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so Greg already mentioned the pitfalls that we could run into when we're using metrics or measurement. And we put some quotes here that kind of represent this act of finding the right balance. Like on the left-hand side, you see Ellie Goldratt, who said, "Tell me how you measure me, and I will tell you how I behave." And on the right-hand side, you see, "If you can't measure it, you can't improve it," by Peter Drucker. So even though this measurement is crucial for improvement, we have decided here not to go too deep into the complexities of agile metrics and measurement, because that would probably fill a whole webinar, right? But instead, we will focus here on a practical approach of team assessment. Maybe Emily or Suzanne can share with you a blog post from our colleague Ninya, who went into detail on metrics, and you could read a little bit more about this topic in there and how to use those metrics to improve team performance. So talking about this balancing act here, I just want to mention some of those pitfalls you can run into when using metrics and measurement. For example, focusing on the wrong metrics. Like one common pitfall would be placing excessive focus on metrics that don't truly reflect the agile values and principles. If we only measure output-based metrics, such as, for example, lines of code or the number of tasks completed. In this case, we would, for example, miss the bigger picture of value delivery or customer satisfaction. And people would only focus on creating more and more output and creating more and more lines of code, whereas we are not sure if this really creates value to the customer. A second pitfall could be gaming the metrics, and this is what the first quote refers to. When metrics really become the primary goal instead of a means for improvement, the teams might be tempted to manipulate or game those metrics. Like they would like to meet the predefined targets, which then leads to superficial improvements that can be measured, but don't really cause a change. And in this case, we would compromise the integrity of the assessment. Yeah. So it's important to really create a culture of trust and transparency to mitigate this pitfall. The third one we want to talk about here would be incomplete or biased metrics. So metrics that provide an incomplete or biased view can also misguide assessments. Like if we solely rely on quantitative metrics without considering the qualitative aspects, as we said in the beginning, we may overlook important factors such as the collaboration of the team, the moral, or their want to innovate. So it's crucial to really strike a balance between quantitative and qualitative measurements. To define metrics that align with agile values and principles, it allows us to promote a collaboration and really value delivery. So it's important to embrace a growth mindset and foster a culture of continuous improvement within the team. So as we said before, it's important to regularly reassess and refine also the metrics to ensure that they are still relevant and also effective. And this was our part about the theoretical stuff. And what I said also earlier, why we don't go too much into metrics here, we really want to show you now a practical approach to assessment, how we've done that in the past, and how you could maybe also approach that.
So this is the big picture, and we'll be diving into each part of this in a moment. But it all begins with that team self-assessment, and we'll show you what that looks like. And the conversation about the results and the conversation with the team about the results, which should initiate or identify areas of improvement that can be continuously worked on and improved and grown over time. And it's circular, as Les has said, that we might revisit the assessment, see where we are now, how things have changed, how have we improved. But let's take it step by step. So first, the team self-assessment. There are different ways of doing this that we've come up with, and depending on the maturity of the team, how long has a team been together? Do they know what the Agile Manifesto said? Have they heard about the Agile values and principles? And if not, we'd probably try this online survey where we mention the value, give a one-liner interpretation of how we interpret that value to mean, and then provide 3 indicators to the team to rate. Do they do this always, sometimes, or never? And each of these would be an indicator or a practice that the team is living this particular principle. For more advanced teams, we would have a workshop together with them, or in this case, remote, where we would provide the principles and then ask the team, which ones are you good at? Rate yourself and tell us what practices you have in place to live that principle. And here you see a Miro example of how that could be done with concrete practices. And for those principles where they need improvement or want to improve, we would ask them, what are your ideas? What do you think you could do to improve on that? And maybe let's try an experiment, or let's put that on our backlog for the next sprint or sprints. This is how we'll talk more about that later, but this is 2 ways of doing this. So either online in a survey type, or here in a conversation, in best case all together in a room, but that also works since COVID remotely. Once we have conducted the assessment, we would then look at the results, and the results again can be displayed in different ways. Coming from the survey, we might see something like this, where you have a bar diagram showing which very positive principle number 10 versus a principle number 6 that got very low ratings. And down below that, we look deeper into principle 6, how they rated each of those statements. And we might see that statement number 2 and number 1 were low. So that might be somewhere we look deeper into. Or in the spider diagram or circular diagram here, we can see where some principles are rated lower. Again, here 6 and 12 in this case. And that is a cumulative scoring across those 4 areas. So we'd have those results, and we'd want to have that conversation with the team and get their thoughts. What do they see? Are they surprised by that? What are they doing well, and what can they keep doing to keep doing that well? And which areas would they like to focus on going forward? And out of that, we're going to show you exactly how we would approach that then with the coaching structure in a moment. But from that discussion, we do the circle and start some intervention, or start introducing some coaching tools or techniques to improve on that particular principle. And then we might come back and to another assessment, and that might look like this, where we ran it a second time. And here again, we have the 12 principles, and with those, the 3 practices that or 4 practices that they have identified. And the scoring might change over time and go from red to green, like the first one. The row on the left is more recent than the row on the right, or they might have fallen back, as in the case with principle 4, but principle 5 improved. And over time, we might then see, how are we progressing? And we might be surprised at some point to see that the team actually drops. And this could be part of the concept of, Alessa, you want to help me with that?
Kruger effect.
The Kruger-Dunn, I think it's called. where as a team matures, they become more self-critical. They understand better the principle and know we're not really doing as well as we think we are. So they might be a little more, they would fall back, but there is a reason for that. They're actually getting better because they're understanding things better. So how do we bring this into a continuous loop of improvement and growth? For that, we have what we call our coaching structure. And I think I was going to hand over to you for this, or was I doing this?
I can do it, Greg, so you can get some rest. The coaching structure is a loop, as Greg said. And in this case, when we're working with assessment results, we enrich it with the assessment results. So normally the coaching structure always begins with observations. As a coach, you go into a team, you start observing. And in this case, we have the luxury to have data already available that we can use to enrich our observations. So we can see how they collaborate, how they work together. And this will be the basis of our coaching approach. The next step will then be to formulate hypotheses. So we try to explain what we have observed, what could be reasons for the behavior that we see. And what is important here is that we need to validate our hypothesis to really prevent cognitive bias from influencing ourselves. So if you have an observation and a hypothesis, make sure that you really validate it before going further in this loop. And once it is validated, we should identify goals that then describe the behavior that we would like to have the team work towards for improvement. For example, if we have principle 6, which is pretty low, we will define a goal state that the team wants to achieve in order to become better in that. So the next step then would be to define indicators that are integral to the idea of the coaching structure and will measure if we pay into that goal or not. And when we're doing that, we are defining leading and lagging indicators. So that we can have something that we can look at to see, are we on the right track towards the goal, or do we need to adapt our approach? So finally, the last step will then be choosing coaching tools that will help us getting there towards the goal. And this last step is to ensure that the indicators don't measure the actions that we take over the goal that we want to reach. So basically, we capture our observations. We then go into the hypothesis. We define goals, indicators, and coaching tools. We use coaching cards for that, which is another structured approach to coaching, and we fill them up step by step. Basically, this is just those 5 points that we just discussed in different quadrants of a card. So this follows a loop. It's a circular loop, and it is not finished once we have run through it once, but we need to adapt on the way, reinvestigate our observations, our hypotheses, improve the tools that we're using, and maybe refining our goals on the way. So we will move in this loop until we have reached our goal. And the next part is going to be a little bit about coaching tools. This is something.
If I could say beforehand, in using this structure, it really helps, particularly if you're new as a Scrum Master or Agile Coach, where you're constantly firefighting and everything's burning around you, but to give yourself focus and say, this is where my focus is going to be with this team, with this card for this sprint. Yeah, and introducing a tool, observing, looking for indicators, and it really kind of puts some of the other fires off for now and have a clear focus instead of running around with the chicken with your head cut off, as I did at the beginning. And oftentimes when doing this, you'll also discover how wrong you are in coming up with hypotheses. And it's because we're also biased oftentimes, and our observations, it's not always telling us what we're actually seeing, and we're assuming a lot. So it's, as Lessa said, let's try to validate that hypothesis as early as possible by going and asking questions and continue challenging yourself, and maybe even find a sparring partner, another coach that you can talk to and say, this is what I'm seeing, and I think it's because of this. What do you think? And that's oftentimes a good way to discover and dig more into finding out what's really going on. And then establishing the goal and the indicators. And all that within the coaching card, and then coaching tools. And coaching tools are a lot of different things: methods, techniques, workshop formats, anything that you can introduce to try to adjust the behavior within the team. It's very loosely defined, and it could be a lot of things. I often talk about the most simple example, and probably the first one I used was in a daily stand-up to have a ball or a talking stick, where you would regulate who talks at one time, so that not everyone's talking at the same time, or one person's not dominating the conversation, right? And to make sure everyone has a chance to talk. That's the most simple coaching tool. And the funness in the stand-up, you throw, and another thing being a ball, you can throw it to the next person, so everybody's listening to what others are saying, because they want to know when the ball is going to be thrown. So that could be a simple one, a Kanban board. It would be a more complex one, or as we're going to see shortly, active learning cycle, which is something a Scrum Master or coach can use with a team. So the number of coaching tools is infinite. We have gone ahead and put together some in what we call our practical guide to Agile team coaching, which covers the 12 principles. And because we're Agile 42, we have 42 tools that you can use with the principles to try to improve your team's practices in living the principles. And what this is, if I can zoom in here, is we have a description again of the Agile team principles team assessment. What would be preconditions to think about, which was the right type of assessment to do, how to facilitate it. And then for each principle, we've gone ahead, and again, like I showed you in the survey earlier, we would have the principle of one sentence that makes it a little bit clear what is meant by that. The goal, what would that look like if the team were doing that well? Some indicators if they're going in the right direction. These would be leading indicators that you're observing what the team is doing. And if they're doing this, they're going to be close to that goal. And here's a collection of tools that might help with that particular principle. And we've done that for all 12 principles. And then, as I mentioned, the 42 tools. And here is the example of the active learning cycle, where you would use this as a tool to keep, okay, what are the things we keep? The working agreements, our definition of ready, definition of done, or release definition of done. Then you might bring this into a retrospective and ask for observations. What is making us faster? What's accelerating? What are putting the brakes on? What is slowing us down? And then in that retrospective, to think about what are things that we could try and experiment with. And if they're working for us, then let's put them into keep. This is an example of a coaching tool, a little bit more extensive one that is a little more complex than the ball or the talking stick. But just an example that what we've included in this little booklet that we're just putting together, and we're hoping to get printed and get it out to the community soon. And to do that, we would like to ask your help. If you would be interested in getting a copy of the practical guide to Agile team coaching, then use this QR code. It will lead you to a Google form where we ask for your name and email address and put you on the waiting list. And as soon as we have copies printed, or at least in a electronic form, we will let you know and get it out to you.
And I already saw in the chat that we have 2 people who proactively already asked for the copy, so that's cool. Just feel free, fill out the form so that we get your email address. We're still working on it, and happy to share it. Okay, somebody's asking for the link. I will get that. Give me a second.
Okay. And with that, we have now come to your questions. And I'm going to stop sharing screen and start answering questions.
So I'm going to invite everyone to add your questions to the Q&A if you still have some, but we do have one immediately, and I'm going to open it up to both of you. So the question is, how can we overcome teams' we know it all attitude in terms of agility?
Well, that would be a great opportunity to bring in the second type of assessment, where I said, well, if that's the case, let's look at the principles and tell us where you're particularly good and what it is you do to make you so good. And it's often there where people say, well, we don't really do that very well. And that's where having that open discussion, open conversation about that. And also in that open conversation in a workshop type atmosphere with open blanks, you can challenge the team when they say, well, we do this. And you say, well, I've been working with you and I haven't been seeing that. Or you then can show the mirror and share them with them what you're seeing and say, could we do this a better way? Are we really as good as we think we are?
I think that's a valid question for everybody. Thank you for that question. Next one I have is, if agility is a tool to reach goals and becoming agile itself is not a goal, why are we trying to measure agility? And there's a part 2 to this question. Why are we simply not measuring how we are doing with business goals?
Alessa, would you like to start?
I need to reread the question because it's pretty long, to be honest.
Where is it?
In the Q&A section, Greg. Click on Q&A, it should be the top one.
I'm still in the chat, I'm sorry.
So
if I could, I'll start. And when we go into a company, and we often have to say that, because we're in the late majority now, and people say, we've heard about this stuff at Agile. We want that too. Where can we buy it? And we say, well, that's not the goal. It is a means to the goal. And your business goal is in the forefront. And we think, and we've seen in other companies, becoming more agile in the way you're working will help you reach your goals faster, better. So when we then start a transformation, then we'll have other things that we're measuring. We're not measuring the agility. We'll come up with success factors across the organization. And particularly, these are success factors which will help the company reach their goal, their business goal. And within that, there might be a simple, let's set up a Scrum team or a couple teams that are working in an agile way. And then we'd start them off, and then we'd say, well, how are we doing with that? Are we doing Scrum? That's doing Scrum. And are we becoming agile in the way we approach things? And is this helping us to succeed toward our business goals? I hope that somewhat answers your question.
If you have more comments, please just put them in the chat, and we can always share additional information on our various platforms. But next question, how do we handle teams that feel agile ways of working is being imposed upon them and they are resistant to any kind of change?
I think in that case, I would ask the question, why are you wanting the teams to become agile? What do the teams think about that? What might hinder them? What might be in their way? What is the culture like? What are they surrounded of? And what is the reason why they are resistant? And I would really go one step back and understand what's going on around this team. There is certainly reasons why they behave that way. But before moving on, I would really try to understand what is blocking them, what is hindering them, and how can we remove those obstacles to help them look into the future.
Yeah, there must have been something that happened in their recent past that makes them feel it's being imposed on them. And this is really something you would take to the leadership and say, why is this happening? Why is this a feeling? Where's this coming from? And how can we, with the leadership team, how can we change that? Because this is not the behavior you want. And it's probably caused by your behavior to the leadership.
Further to your point, Greg, someone said in the chat, it's very right, changes have to be top down. So that's another point there. Our next question would be, they call you Gregory, which sounds very formal. Gregory, you mentioned misuse of velocity as a metric. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, and I don't want to take too much time because this is, again, a pet peeve of mine. I've been in situations where the management would say, well, let's record all the team's velocities and we'll compare them to one another and we'll see which team has a higher velocity. That's one of the misuses. Another thing is, especially if you're using story points, I always say a team, it's not a basketball team that needs to score points. We want to deliver value to the customer. We should be measuring outcomes and not points or output. We can create a lot of things that are wrong and that the customer doesn't like, but let's measure the things that the customer likes. And velocity was thought of as a planning tool that we understand. Another word for it, it's not mass and speed, but rather capacity. How much can a team pull into a sprint and think they can complete within that sprint? Yeah. And oftentimes there, again, it will be misused. As a young product owner will say, well, that's your commitment. That's a contract. And now you have to deliver. So I've seen a lot of misuse and abuse with velocity, although it is a good tool. And as I mentioned, a recent conversation with Jeff Sutherland said that's the measure of performance. But I think he's thinking more value delivery. So we're delivering more value, and it's not a story point number or something like that. And I hope that answers a little bit of your question, and I'm going to leave it at that before I get too upset.
That's another webinar in itself. But
Yes.
the one where Greg cries. But we do have about 10 minutes left, so I think we have time for at least 2 more questions. We'll try to get through more. The next one I'm going to pull up is from where can I start to assess the performance of a team as an SM? So I think that's Scrum Master. Where to start?
I can answer that quickly, but it probably won't be satisfactory. As soon as you walk in the door, observe. It's most of the work of a Scrum Master is observing what's happening in the room. And it's not just at the stand-up, it's during the day, the interactions with people are having with each other. How are they making decisions? Yeah. Are they able to make decisions? Where do you need to help them? It's really that observation, and I wouldn't say interviewing, but asking questions. Yeah. I would always excuse myself at the beginning. This is going to be a dumb question, but why are you doing it this way? Or I don't know what the situation would be. And I would always preface it by this might be stupid, but they would like that, and to a point where sometimes when I wouldn't be at the stand up and they get stuck, they would say, now what would Greg ask?
What dumb question would Greg?
Alessa, do you want to add to that?
Totally agree. You start at the moment where you get in and get in touch with the team. And I also tend in the beginning to be more in the background, to just see what's happening there, not be too prominent, because I don't want to interrupt the dynamics, and just see unobserved what the team is doing. And that would be my first step, also to assess how the team is doing.
And if I could just add one more thing, I always kept a notebook, I still do. And sometimes I would divide the page and say, this is what I'm observing. This is what I think's happening, what's causing it. Yeah, the observation hypotheses, but always writing things down and then reviewing it and just thinking about using that as a tool. What am I observing? And creating a coaching card eventually out of that, where I find, okay, this is going to be my focus.
Yeah, focus is very important, to not get lost in all the things that might be going on, but really observe, maybe prioritize what you see in your observations and then focus on a few of them, and then really structure your approach to not get lost and trying to put out all the fires that might be burning around you, because then you lose yourselves and the teams won't get the best benefit out of it.
The person who did write that question did say thank you, so I don't believe totally unsatisfactory answers there. Next question I have is, what would be a good way to convince leadership to change the wrong metrics used to measure teams' agile maturity or performance?
I'll start. You want to start?
Yeah, I was going back to what we said earlier with the pitfalls of metrics and the balancing act that you're going through. And maybe the quotes that we shared today can help you with convincing leadership. On the one hand, you need metrics to improve, but on the other hand, they can be gamed. They can also provoke behaviors that are not wanted. I don't know what metrics you are talking about exactly and why you think they are not adequate, but that would be something, if you observe that they are doing, that they are not going towards the goal that the metrics should achieve, then you should make this transparent and share that with leadership. Because with metrics only, for example, if you're only measuring output, as we said, people might create stuff to generate output, but it might not generate value to the customer. And this is something you can make transparent and use for your discussions with leadership to convince them.
Or a metric, we want to find as many errors as possible, many failures as possible, as many as possible. So if that becomes the goal, you're missing out, you're going in the wrong direction. People might even be creating them just to be able to find them later. And that's not going to bring you ahead as an organization. It might be a focus for a while where you might say, yeah, we do have to do something about quality. Yeah. So having a clear reason why you're going to start measuring something, and then use that to help you see if you're progressing.
Maybe an example from that, I've been working in a company where the product owners were measured on the number of acceptance criteria they put on a story. So that led to product owners putting in lots and lots of acceptance criteria, even in little stories where it was just about changing the text. And there was 5 acceptance criteria, and it went into a point where we said it just doesn't make sense. But since the bonuses were paid upon the number of acceptance criteria, people did it. So this is a very provocative example of how metrics can go wrong. And you should definitely make that transparent if metrics don't make sense.
So we're just about 3 minutes from the end. I'm going to stop questions there. We have more questions. We'll take note of them and we'll try to answer them as best we can on our various platforms. So do make sure you're following us. If I can ask Emily to share the screen, and I can talk you through the discount some of you may have seen at the start. So we're just going to share with you in a moment a discount code. So we've put together a bundle of our e-learnings, which we believe fit quite well with today's topic. You can, of course, buy the full bundle. There's a 40% discount, or you can pick and choose which trainings make the most sense for you. But like I said, it's a 40% discount. If you go to the checkout in our shop, if you put in the term teamwork, that will give you your discount. If you prefer not to go through the shop or need an invoice, you can always contact us on int-office, OFFICE, at agile42.com, and we would be happy to help you purchase the e-learnings with the discount through that method. Like I mentioned, the recording of this webinar will be available. We'll firstly, in the next few days, send just the recording, and then in about a week or so, we'll send you a more detailed recording with some information Please do sign up for our newsletter, follow us on our various platforms. We always announce our webinars and they'll be coming up next and tell you which topics we'll have. Thank you again for your questions. Thank you for joining us. And we hope to see you in the next one. Wishing you a good rest of the day. Thank you, Alessa and Greg and Emily.
I'm still writing some answers here.
Yeah, same.